Sifu, it's so good to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. There's a bit of a forest fire, so there's a lot of smoke in the air. So if I'm snuffling or coughing or something, it's because, you
Oh,
know, it's
down
fire
here.
season.
It happens every year now. Geez.
Yeah. And I gotta say, it's really good to see you. And we've known each other a really long time. And to see you out there teaching Qigong, it just fills my heart with joy because so many people are going to get so much benefit from your experience and your wisdom and just the way that you show up in the world. So the world's a better place now because you're teaching Qigong.
Well, I'm just listening to you and my other teachers. They all tell me to teach Qigong. I've been resisting it for years, but uh, I think I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's going to make a difference for a lot of people.
Yes.
So, because we're going to have a few conversations about Qigong, it occurred to me that maybe an interesting place to start would be the history of Qigong. And I'm curious if that's something you feel like you've got a really clear kind of sense of like this is really what we know or where it's from. You know, what are we really all doing here?
Yeah. The history is a good place to start. You want to start? What's the history of Qigong, Sifu? Yeah.
Well, I have a really rebellious story about that, so I was hoping you'd give people a more official version, and then I can be rebellious after.
Like my history of Qigong or like the history of Qigong?
The history of Qigong. I wish I had an echoing microphone.
Um, Well, Qigong is actually the wrong name because it started in the 1940s. Classically speaking, as far as I know, Qigong is really two things, right? It's like your physical fatality, which somewhere down here, and then emotional healing, and then merging. And these two is spirituality. So you got spirituality, and then you got physical fatality. Around the 1940s up to the 60s, the Chinese government wanted to make a great leap forward to modernize China. And with good intentions of doing this, they end up killing over 50 million people. And they burn books and they try to destroy anything that was ancient Chinese. So they took the Taoism Buddhist practices, anything esoteric or spiritual, they named it superstitious, and they claim that it is one of the major reasons why China is behind as a third world country. They torture and murder monks and nuns, burn temples, burn scriptures. They stripped off the esoteric part of Taoism and Buddhism and left physical fatality. Like exercise is okay, we'll let you have that. But anything else, we're gonna do everything in our power to kill it. And my grandfather used to tell me a lot about the revolution. It was brutal, but I won't talk about that because we're trying to keep it not gross, right?
Yeah.
So they took the physical fatality part and now they have to rebrand it. So they start calling it qigong. But up until that point in Chinese history, as far as I know, that word didn't exist. The physical fatality part, the actual name of it for I don't know how long, was Yang San Gong. Yang means to nourish, I guess. San is your body, and Gong is, there's really no translation for Gong, but accomplishment or skill through effort and suffering and bitterness, eating bitter. So, yeah, there's no literal translation because we use Gong for everything, Kung Fu, Qi Gong, everything, right? Even cooking, you know? So yeah, so that's qigong, and then the esoteric stuff. As far as I know, the oldest term is Daoist. Dao means the Tao, and Sut means there's no translation for this either. Poetry, art, skill, and the oldest scripture in Taoism is Nei Yi, but it's only the oldest because it's the oldest that archaeology can find. Who knows what they'll find in a couple of years, right? So they found it in some rich guy's tomb, the Nei Yi, and now that Chinese scholarship academic world is going through chaos because now they have to rewrite the narrative that is not Lao Tzu. So now it's about the Nei Yi, and if you read the Nei Yi, for many people is now starting to read it, it's about sitting practice and it's about merging. It's
Yeah.
about qigong at all, right? So, but then if you look at that's Zhou dynasty, and it predates Lao Tzu by at least 600 years. Now, if you look at after, that's the earliest archaeology find of merging sitting, non-doing. And then if you look at the Qin dynasty, the dynasty right afterwards, it's the first evidence they found in a vase, in a cave painting, of standing practice. So now we get the non-doing sitting and non-doing standing. And then by the time we get to the Han dynasty, that's when it kind of went. The doing practices started getting a huge popularity. The modern inheritors of that would be Neidan, Loidan, or internal alchemy. And there's a lot of doing, a lot of stages, a lot of techniques, and it's beautiful, it's great. It's a structured, systematic process, as far as I know. But in some ways, it's not what the Nei said at all about non-doing, and just simply not doing and dissolving and merging to the Tao. It is more like a ladder you climb till you get, essence into chi into spirit, spirit into emptiness, and kind of mirrors the process of Hinduism, where the original Abhidharma in the Upanishads was about non-doing. That Atman and Brahman is the same. The water in the ice cube and the water in the ocean is both water, the original nature. And then later Hinduism became Kundalini, pure doing practice. As I wonder about that, the best guess I have is maybe society evolved to the point in China where doing became necessary. Because it seems like the dudes up in the mountains that made this stuff up just said, hey man, just merge. There's nothing to do. Because in Nei it says, don't visualize it, don't reflect on it, do not try to control it, do not manipulate it. Just be tranquil and the chi will come. So, but the second thing that really blew my mind was when the word chi, Tao, virtue, and essence was used interchangeably. Unlike Han Dynasty, they have very precise definition of these terms as though they're somehow separate. But the original Taoism is like, no, it's the same stuff. You're just feeling it with different centers, right? Anyways, I'll shut up, Sifu. But yeah, that's my take so far on Taoism is like the history is not accurate. Like people think qigong is but as we sit in the oral tradition, not just everything I said so far is scholarship, but in the oral tradition, I remember Professor Jing said the very first class I had with him, he said there's no such thing as Taoism philosophy. They were all practitioners. The people that made up medicine, herbology, acupuncture, Chinese philosophy, all of them were practitioner and mystics. There's no philosophy because that's a BS from communist era. And I go, okay, Sifu. And he said, second thing, this predates language. It doesn't matter what they find. So it doesn't matter if a nuclear bomb hit Earth and this stuff go extinct. In a few thousand years, somebody will invent it again because it's as natural as taking a shit, Yeah, I thought that was like really neat because now scholars are about to kill each other about the right date of Nei, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. This actually predates language. It's just you guys are just digging up the oldest one you can find, but just because someone decided to write it down, but it exists long before someone wrote it down. Mm-hmm. Anyways, yes, if you go ahead, but yeah, that's my take on it so far.
Well, I guess you've stolen my thunder there by saying it goes back before language, because that's what I like to start with is I'll just maybe before I start, I'll just say, picking up where you were just speaking to, the dilemma I think all of us really have today, here it is 2025, which I still have to wrap my mind around. And, our minds are like a little periscope on a submarine. We can look at the present, we can look at the future, oh my God, what's AI going to do? And then we can turn our periscope back, our minds back, and look at the past. And because scholars and, education and everything, we have, the evidence of the books, and then they has like the classic. I love that book. I might even translate it myself for fun one day. But there's so many books were burned in by Qin Shi Huangdi, the guy kind of reformed China, a couple of thousand years ago. We have no way to know how many books existed before that. So for us, looking back at the past, going, we've got this stepping stones of all these books to follow, our little adventure into where this comes from in the sense of written language. We have no idea how to know how much we can't know because the guy burned almost every book in China. Yeah. So what if, though, we decided to take a moment and just reflect on, like you said, this might be one of the most natural things ever. So let's go back into a cave, and if you don't like caves, let's go back into a mud hut. And maybe we have some rudimentary language, maybe we don't. It doesn't really matter if we have language, but there's 4 seasons, depending on where you live. Winter is often a time when a lot of people are stuck in a hut or a cave, if you want to go back to caveman time or whatever. What are you going to do stuck in a small space with a dozen other people for 5 months? Well, if you just sit still all of the time or try and lie on, maybe you've got a bare rug or something, you're going to get very, very sick from being sedentary, from being in the same physical positions for too long. It might go a little bit, depending on language, if it's, in the mind or not at that time of our evolution, you're going to have more or less of a hard time with the boredom of just being stuck in that space with a bunch of people. Right. So I'm speaking about this from both my understanding of Chinese history, but also my understanding of indigenous history in North America, because that's a part of my background, but also with respect to just the evolutionary history of human beings. So let's all go back, 20,000 years, 50,000 years, whatever feels right, in that hut or that cave. And you're going to sit in there eating beef jerky or, I don't know, bison jerky or what's that, woolly mammoth jerky or something for the next 5 months as you listen to the old people tell stories and fart. So there's 2 things that are going to happen to every living animal, from cats to dogs to humans to anyone. One, you're going to start noticing that when you bring your attention to your breath, when you bring your attention to your posture, when you bring your attention into your gaze and you loosen all of those connections enough to just sort of swim in a state of sense, but also open kind of awareness, curiosity, but nothing new is coming into your awareness, this other thing starts to happen, which is, the merging you're talking about in a way. We start having different experiences that are really hard to put into words. That's the first line of the Tao Te Ching, Dao Ke Dao Fei Chong Ta. You talk about it, you're not experiencing it. So we have this one thing that's really important that has to do with meditation and aspects of qigong. And again, that's a modern word. I'll come back to some other words in a moment. But it's just the mind letting go of its need to be apprehensive, to be focused on this or that. And when the mind becomes into what we might call a hypnagogic flow state or a liminal state, if you want to be scientific, we start having liminal or spiritual or shamanic kind of animistic realizations or reconnections with what we really are. Lots of ways to look at that. Now, one of the oldest terms that's still used for qigong, as we think of it now, was Daoyin. Daoyin, the character for Dao, which I don't have a way to write down right now, is Dao, like, Taoism, with a little radical attached to it, which is a small unit or a way of measuring or assessing something. So let's just take a moment and ask ourselves experientially, what's an increment or a measurable component or a tangible piece of the Tao? Well, it's your moment-to-moment lived experience of being a being. There's emotional, there's mental, physical. The more complicated the world gets, the more the periscope looks around, the more that part of Tao can get convoluted or confusing or dangerous or potentially destructive or potentially opportunistic, which I'll come back to in a sec. So again, we're thinking about Daoyin as a description of what it's like to practice. We have our incremental, tangible, moment-by-moment experience. So what's it like to be in your body, in your mind, and in your heart right now? Character Yin is a person pulling on a bow, aiming. But it also means the flexing of the bow and the tautness of the string and how that helps you aim and be accurate. So we have these tangible moments of existence, and then we have this interactive thing with tension and tone. So when for people who don't know, I'm a doctor and a professor, so I use a lot of big words sometimes. So if you're sitting in that cave and you're stretching like a cat, which a lot of qigong is just moving and opening and all of that. That's technically called pandiculation. And if you don't do enough pandiculation, you'll get very sick. Right? You stay still too long, your muscle fascia turn into Velcro, and then your body turns into a ball of scar tissue, inflammation, and pain. Cats, we all think of cats as kind of high-strung, busy little, critters running around doing what they do. Cats medically or clinically have to pandiculate 40 to 60 times a day to not get sick.
Yeah, my cat all day.
So here we are back in that cave or that hut, coming into a place where, as evolution, 100,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, as language comes into the game, we're starting to have different ways of relating to the conscious experience of just being embodied, being a mind, being aware, being connected to what's beyond words. That was easier before words, but when you have words, you kind of like, oh, I guess there's no word for that. Maybe we'll make one up. So we have that part, but a big part of human evolution around the world for 200,000 years is the need to pandiculate, the need to move in rhythmic moments where you push one limb away from your spine, maybe articulate the other limb in the same way, in a different way around your spine, so that you can feel the tone of tense tissue across your body, so that you can actually sigh, yawn, stretch, open, release, relax. And pandiculation usually comes with a yawning reflex. And in Chinese medicine, we often say when a person's yawning in qigong practice, it means the stagnant qi is free to move. Nice. Right? So here's this thing about Daoyin, one of the oldest terms of practice is, well, you're going to experience life subjectively in little tangible pieces, and that can pile up into a lot of stress, or it can become just a reflection of what existence is like for everyone. And then again, we have yin, the pandiculation part, which is anytime you're stiff and tense, the more you map out what you're feeling, the more you move with it, into, around, sometimes against what you're feeling, the more you're drawing that bow to be accurate with both the tension that's there, the precise line of tension inside the tension, how to accurately set that up, and then how to release the tension through your whole body. So that's what's described in 2 words, Daoyin, right? I love Chinese for that. I could put like an entire PhD in 2 words or a thesis into 2 words. There's other words since then, like Gong, which I think you had said in Cantonese, which are inner nourishing skills, which is more about a sense of energy and aliveness that you can hold in places, good feelings, good moods, good thoughts, good sounds. There's healing sounds, all of that. And those are what we would call Yowei, or the doing side of practice. And I think the more inherently conceptual we become as people, the more language becomes concept and if-then kind of left brain, the more we naturally end up finding tools and skills and relationships with our life, with our fertility, with our pain, with our stress, with other things about spiritual cultivation that seem more specific. So instead of going, well, you can merge or you can move like a cat. Or you could maybe create a sensation between your hands and have the sense that that might be something of value to bring closer to a wound or to a friend in need. And anyone can deliberate what is literally happening, but on a relational level, on an experiential level, it's very clear that every culture in the world has some kind of energy hands-on healing. So words get confusing and the left brain wants to know exactly what it's doing. But I think a lot of those doing practices naturally evolve based on kind of what we hope might happen based on how we feel about what we understand. It's only in the modern world that we have tools and like literal science where we believe that we can do something exactly right, repetitively or consistently and measurably in some way. And that's it's causing a little bit of a challenge for people because this it's an experiential process and practice and journey, and it's very unique to each of us. So I think the more we try and make it literal, put it in a box, try and sell it to people like it's in itself magic just because they bought it is going to go very badly for people. I think the more you can find people who inspire you to practice as wholeheartedly as you can, as deeply and curiously as an embodied animistic animal being as you can, the more you're going to discover what Daoyin, Gong, qigong, whatever you want to call it, will be for you. You know, but my first thing with history is let's go back 10,000 years and walk into the present as human beings around the world, and we'll see where all of this comes from.
Mm. Well said, Sifu. History is important. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's like, you know, the kind of the standard way that the history is understood from what you had said and what I had said. Can you think of anything else that might, I don't know, man, the only reason I like talking about the history is so that we can finally put our mind to a place where like, okay, that doesn't matter anymore. I know enough to leave that alone so I can go and practice now.
Yeah. I don't think it matters. I think that is here right now. I mean, we think in terms of time, right? But
Yeah.
I don't think the stuff thinks in terms of time.
Yeah. That's why I love the term Daoyin, because it invites us to go, right now there's a tangible opportunity to feel into and interact with the living experience of being.
Yes.
In nature, beyond.
They were originally one thing, you know, like the sitting, the standing, and the movement, Daoyin, right? And laying down. Those are the only four ways a man can practice according to the Buddha. The four dignities of man, you call it: sitting, standing, moving, and laying down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the authentic qigong system has all four.
Yeah.
Either or wild goose qigong or anything predating 1940 Mao Zedong systems always have four.
Yeah.
And movement, besides the external layer of the onion, like the, you know, muscle tendons change, Daoyin stretching, somatic style stretching, kind of like very advanced versions of yoga posturing. Great. But another aspect that I found fascinating with movement in Qigong, besides the fascia and the muscle and tendon, besides the releasing, is crossing between form and no form. Because this is going to sound weird, but you know, like when you sit and you feel like your body dropped off, sitting and forgetting, because something in the must be something in the mirror neurons that's turning off your spatial awareness. So like it's almost like you're in a flow tank. You feel like that's cool. Then you merge. I'm not going to talk about that because we should do an entire podcast on the, because that's a long thing on that. But you look around and everything, you're in no form, right? You close your eyes and you reach the state of emptiness, let's say. But then you have to get up and take a shit and pay taxes and go to work and go to your kitchen. And now you see form. You see form. So now there's a split in your awareness. But when you can get away with that when you're standing, because you naturally, you can close your eyes and then you're in the zone. Or you get in there really quick with sitting, and you definitely get there when you're sleeping. But there's one place you can't get away with it, and that's moving. When you're walking in a circle, for example, you close your eyes, you hit the wall. Movement demands you to not close your eyes especially if you're treating a natural environment where there's trees and dangerous rocks. You're forced to keep your eyes open. So now, whatever emptiness, DMT trip you went on while you're sitting and standing, you're forced to try to maintain that state while your eyes is open. And in Hinduism, that's considered a basic form of enlightenment, where when you close your eyes and trip balls, if you have the same amount of tripping balls when your eyes is open, and okay, so you know, sometimes when I'm sitting, I feel a certain way that's really cool. And again, we might do another podcast on that because that's like your personal DMT trip while you're sitting, right? So you might see these things, experience these things, and it's great. But as soon as you open your eyes to cook dinner, that's gone. You're back in the matrix. You plug back in. But when you're walking, or some kind of movement qigong that demands you to be aware of your environment, you're walking to a corner of your coffee table, then you're forced to try to maintain that state. Trying is a bad word, but you're forced to build a connection to that state even when you're back in the form realm, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think movement qigong should not be skipped. No offense to my Zen Zazen friends out there watching this. I love you guys, but maybe just sitting or just standing. It's good to have some movement.
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I said beyond the stretching and the strength, which is really damn important too. But that's one thing that I think some of my Zazen friends might have missed.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's well, right now there's 8 billion different ways to be here, so there's lots of ways to look at it. But what if you were to just say, and this is something we do in medicine a lot, is let's look at this as a spectrum. So let's say there's an autistic spectrum and all kinds of spectrums, right? So, and maybe before I get into that, I would want to just say, I'm very, very grateful that most of my teachers left China before 1920 or kept what they knew secret until they left China after communism let them leave. Because I've only had maybe 1 or 2 teachers who were coming out of the Qigong fever with all the new made up stuff. Every other teacher I had, lineages going back hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's a completely different thing. Everybody that I really have, that I would look at as a complete teacher, had all 4: the seating, the lying, the stillness, the moving, right? So let's say that there's a healthy spectrum, and when we look at the classical forms, and there's always different versions of the classical forms, lineages kind of go off in different directions for many reasons, and they all make sense in the way that they do. But I think what's really of value in seeing it that way is if we look at a spectrum like a rainbow, every color in the rainbow has a really, really potent, let's say, medicine or gift or journey to go on to really understand something. So if we're doing moving, you could have very spontaneous fluid. I don't mean spontaneous like shaking. I mean spontaneous like, say, Tian qigong, we just turn into kelp in the ocean and allow the ocean to decide, which is my students' favorite part of qigong every class. Can we do the kelp now? Can we do the kelp now? So we have that kind of practice, and then we have movement practice like, say, Baduan Jin, 8 pieces of brocade. That's, a few different versions, but you want to kind of do it right? And there's something really potent in the spectrum of possible ways to practice. If we're all the way over here on this side of the rainbow or this side of the spectrum, what do we get out of doing forms over and over and over again? Deeper skills, deeper memories and awareness of how our embodied coordination works, our alignment, our structure. You can only relax into the hammock you trust. So weeks go by, months go by, years go by. Your ability to release into the form and become formless in your form is really a trust game of like falling into someone's arms or falling into a hammock. And you only allow yourself to fall as much as you're willing to trust. So the thing that helps us move along that spectrum of trust, of experience, of refinement, and letting go completely of the whole idea that refinement was ever a good idea, and then more refinement, and then letting go of refinement. Those are just called principles. And there's so many principles that you'll only get from lineage teachers who will probably make you learn some Chinese. My students get, annoyed sometimes because I'm just going to say the Chinese now, and they're like, okay, fine. But when you get those principles into movement, it's like having a coach or a mentor follow you into every part of your body and make every part of your body connect to the rest of your body in a way that fundamentally teaches you what that principle is for. And then that principle becomes the hammock that allows you to trust a little bit more rotation, a little bit more shift in what you're doing with your pelvis, or a thousand other things. So when we think of, we're talking kind of about the history of Qigong, but also about kind of what present practice is like. You need to be doing all 4. It's lying down, seated, standing, moving. But if you don't have principles and you're just wanting to merge, that's okay. I mean, that's where Taoism started. Like you said, there's nothing to do. You just, the least complicated, the better. But for modern life, I think it's kind of, and I use this metaphor a lot, and I know we're kind of leaving the history of it, but here's my metaphor. Imagine you have to land a helicopter on a moving train. in a storm. And occasionally that train has to go through tunnels. So you only have certain opportunities to, you can see where the tracks are. You can see what your life is doing. You can see what maybe your early childhood trauma is doing or whatever. But until you can land that helicopter, become embodied, become connected, apply principles, go from movements that you're not sure about, like Daoyin, to release into stillness, your stillness isn't stillness. Right? And when we get into stillness, then stillness gets it kind of gets selfish. It wants us to sit down, then it wants us to lie down, then it wants us to, dissolve in a way. And I think the last thing I want to say, maybe before we switch topics or something, is because I kind of have an argument with English as a language, but the word awareness ends in ness. Now, that's obvious. So I'm going to just switch the context for a minute. Because we're in the Western world, if you walk into any room with a bunch of people in it, there's one person in that room who is the cutest person in that room.
Cutest? As in she's hot?
Sorry?
Did you just say cutest, Sifu?
Yeah.
As in she's hot?
He, her, them, whatever people want to call themselves. Anyway, but if we have, and then we took everyone in that room, we could put them in a line and say, you're the cutest. You're cuter than this person, you're cuter than that person, blah, 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 blah. So now we have this hierarchy, this scale, this relationship, and that's what Western life is like. If you were to take everyone in that room, unless you're a complete asshole, in my opinion, which might make me an asshole, everyone in that room has their own unique value of cuteness. So awareness is just one of those things that each of us gets to lean into as a quality of interaction in practice. The longer we train, the better mentors we have on how to train, the more complete our practice and our system of practice is, the more awareness becomes itself again. But a lot of people are trying to sell you how to be the awareest person, competing against other people with your magic powers to do the thing. And it's like the doing qigong plus that periscope of anticipation, plus the periscope of fear if you fail, plus all of the other stuff that makes people anxious and, make up a bunch of silly stuff that we're all still dealing with, in the sense that people want magic powers instead of to merge back into infinite sources of power.
That's a good way to end it. Yeah, that's a good note, Sifu.
Yeah.
That to a bumper sticker, I think we got it.
So yeah, all we need to do is have good teachers, good systems, and opportunities to cultivate awareness. And I think then we're successfully passing on what the history of qigong or Daoyin or Niangong ask us to do, because it isn't just about what we get. We also get a chance to refine how to explore it and express it to the next generation.
Yes.
Right. Because now the history can continue. And I think if we're going to talk about the history of qigong, let's talk about the future history for a moment too. And I'm so glad, like I said when we started the conversation, that you're now out there adding your wisdom, your skill, and your experience to the next generation of people who are practicing. Because that's the next person who's going to talk about the history might have learned from you or I.
Ooh, I'm not much of a historian.
Me neither. But as long as it's before language and for the next, generation, it's going to work.
Crossing my fingers, I'm crossing. Yeah. All right. Let's end it here.
Okay.
I want to continue this conversation with you. How's that? Okay.
Yeah.
Right, let's do that. All right, guys, if you're watching this, please tune into the next episode. We got a lot to talk about. See you later.
All right, so history of qigong. Let's all make sure the history continues, if anything.
Follow the link below. I'm gonna put Sifu's all his contacts and websites in the description below the video. So don't forget to check out the description. See you next episode.
And if you're getting this from anything that I put out there, I'll also be putting a connection to Adam's qigong courses in the description as well, because I can't, there's like 5 people that I would recommend in the world to go and train with. Adam's one of them.
Thank you very much. All right, guys, see you next time.